open up our HTML file, and let's put some HTML in it. So here's the first place where we're going to diverge people who aren't using Visual Studio Code. But if you just type HTML, you should get some things that pop up. One of those choices should say simple HTML5 starting point. Choose that, and it'll just fill in a blank HTML document for you. I will copy and paste this into Slack in just a moment. So again, if you just say HTML, it'll pop up some choices. One of these things will say simple HTML5 starting point with any luck. Just hit enter, and it puts in a blank HTML document. I'll copy and paste this after we make a couple changes to it. Yeah. It's just an autocomplete thing. Into the HTML file. So open the HTML file. Just type HTML. Yeah. There you go. Just hit enter. Or not. Well, no, not sorry. Do that again. Yeah. The second one. There you go. Yep. So notice the page title's already highlighted. Let's change that from page title to Chris Mess. A whole mess. Oh, Chris's. Now you'll notice there's already a link tag for a style sheet and a script tag for main.js. This is the answer to your question, Lewis. So I think it was your question. So here's the link to the style sheet. You'll notice it says main.css. That's not what ours is called. Ours is called index.css. So change that. Change that to index.css. And then the script tag we will also change to index.js. So it's just a link to the style sheet file, and that's how they know that they work together. Now, in the case of the JavaScript, we're going to have a problem because we're going to run our script before the page has actually loaded because we're not even to the body yet. So to avoid that, I'm going to move this script tag to the very end of the body, still inside the body tags, but at the very end. So everything else I'm going to put in the document is going to be above that. So script tag at the very bottom of the body, and everything else I'm going to add will be right here.
So the whole link well, style sheet, type text, all that stuff, that's all what connects like the CSS
and well, that connects the CS. This line here connects the CSS to this HTML file. This line connects the JavaScript file to the HTML file. So it's just a link out to that file. Yeah. Okay. I'll have a look in just a second, okay? I'll copy and paste this here momentarily. Now that we've made these changes. Let's add just one more thing. Let's add an H1 here. So H1, and let's just say Christmas. Yeah, it'll actually put the closing tag in there for you, probably. There's even more tricks. If you do go out to the website for the class and look at VS Code extensions and VS Code key bindings, you can see the extensions and key bindings that I use. And some of those are super, super handy, especially once we get into React for some shortcuts, especially the ones about Emmet. So I'm gonna use those, and I'll talk about them a little bit, just not quite yet today. So let's just make ourselves an H1, and let's see if we can get this to show up on the page. So I'm copying and pasting this much into Slack now, for those of you who didn't have the autocomplete. Now let's see if we can get it to work. So if you did anybody actually do this, install these extensions? So one of them was open in browser. If you installed open in browser, you can actually just hit Alt-B, and it opens that page right up in the browser. If you didn't do that, not to worry. We can open it pretty easily still. In your terminal, as long as you're in that same folder still, you could type open space index.html, and that will open index.html. This is Mac only. Open index.html will open it in the browser. On Windows, that same command is start index.html. Anytime I say open, it's start on Windows. That should open it in your default browser. Open index.html or start index.html. And it should open it in your web browser. Yeah. Should have your H1 there.
So for Windows,
Yeah, that's correct. Is it just blank? Do you have the H1? Go back. You do. Okay, go back to your... Oh, that little dot means it's not saved. So keep this in mind too. This is an important lesson to learn. So if you haven't saved your changes, there will be a little dot that appears in your tab. That dot means you haven't saved since your last change. So if you're driving yourself crazy refreshing the page and not seeing your changes, that's a good thing to check. Yep.
and for Windows, if we don't have the little
The what?
extension installed, how do we get it to like show up on the browser?
Just in the command line, just say start index.html from that folder. So that opens any file in its default, whatever default program. So as long as you're in the same folder as index.html, that should work. Yep. So we want to use our developer tools, right? Hopefully you're using Chrome. If it's not Chrome, you could copy and paste that URL into Chrome real quick and do whatever you need to do to change your default browser, at least for the next 3 weeks. So let's open our dev tools. Once again, it's a keyboard shortcut that is different on Mac and Windows. On Mac, you have Option Command J. On Windows, that is Shift Control J. Shift Control J on Windows, Option Command J on Mac, and it'll open up your developer tools to the JavaScript console. JavaScript console is your friend. Any error messages will appear there, and you can also actually type commands. The Elements tab is also very nice. It lets you inspect the entire page. It actually lets you inspect the DOM. So this is not, although it looks like your HTML, it's not your HTML, it's the actual DOM that got built from the HTML. So if you had any typos, this will actually tell you how the browser interpreted it. So that's the Elements tab. Notice when you hover over elements, they get highlighted on the screen. The Console tab lets you actually type JavaScript commands. That's where error messages will show up. So while we've got this open, let's try to prove that our JavaScript file and CSS file are actually linked up correctly. So in your dev tools, you can also find a tab called Sources. And on the Sources tab, if you see all 3 files, you're good. If you don't, something's wrong with your link tag or your script tag. So to just further confirm that these are working right, I'm going to put just one simple rule in each one. One simple CSS rule and one simple JavaScript command, just to prove that they work. So let's open up index.css, and let's make a simple JavaScript rule. CSS rule. So I said, first of all, you use selector syntax, same as in query selector, except they're not strings now. You just type them. So if we wanted to target the H1, we would just type H1 curly braces. If we wanted to type target the body itself, we would do that. So the way CSS selectors work is it's always matching all elements that match the selector you put. So that would be all body tags. Of course, there's only going to be one body. So just to prove that this works, let's put a quick rule in here. So a selector followed by curly braces, and then a property name that we're targeting, font-family will do. Font-family, :, and then I will say Helvetica, Arial, sans serif, like that. And what this means is if it finds Helvetica, it'll be Helvetica. Failing that, the fallback is Arial. If it doesn't find Arial either, it'll just use whatever sans serif font you happen to have on your machine. And each property and value pair ends with a semicolon. Semicolons are not so optional in CSS. Anybody know what sans serif means? You know what a serif is? Yeah. What's a serif?
Like if a font has like little things on it, like
Right.
the characters, it's kind of hard to explain, but sans serif doesn't have it.
These little dealies. Those slabs are called serifs. Sans serif fonts don't have those. Helvetica is installed on all Macs. Arial is installed on Windows machines. But if you don't have either one of them, it'll fall back to whatever sans serif font you have. So point is, I put the CSS rule in here. I make sure I save. I hit refresh. Font changes. It worked. Our CSS is hooked up right. So we should open up our JavaScript file too, index.js, and we'll just put one line of JavaScript in here to prove that it's working. How about console.log the string, it works. So console.log, strictly speaking, not part of the JavaScript standard and is not on track to become standard, but it is implemented by pretty much every browser. It's very handy. It doesn't work quite the same in all browsers, but everything we're going to do is going to work the same, so it's fine. Console.log, it works. Very nice for debugging if you want to try to find out what a variable's value is at any given time. So let's refresh the page, and on our console I see it works. Other things you can do with console, you can do things like console.warn.
Was it work supposed to show up on screen?
On the console here. Yeah. Refresh the page. Don't forget to refresh after you save. And you'll see a warning shows up a little differently. Console.error. Ah, snap. Shows up differently. Yeah. So you can use those if you need them. We'll just leave that like that. We're just proving that it does, in fact, work. And remember, in the console, you can also type JavaScript commands to run right then and there. Like I could say button equals, or there's no button, but like h1 equals document dot query selector h1, and I get back the actual h1. See, when I hover over it, we know we got the right h1, right? So you can totally do that right there in the console. Now, of course, it won't save it in your file, but if you want to experiment to see if something works, try it out in the console first. Cool? So, good times.